This idea that we need to wait on China and India is a common response to the assertion that the US needs to do something about climate change. And in some ways, it makes sense for us to group these three together. They are the current top emitters of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. But if we actually look at what's happened and what's happening with China and India, the idea that they absolve the US of doing something about climate change falls apart. Currently, the top emitters are China, the US, and India in that order. So let's take China and India as two separate examples. India currently emits about half of what the US does each year. But because their population is vastly larger, they only emit 1/6 or 1/7 of what the US does on a per-person basis. Also, when we take a historical view, India has only emitted about 1/6 of the total emissions that the US has emitted throughout history. So clearly it doesn't make any sense for us to stop acting because of what India has done or is doing. Now let's think about China. They are currently the world's largest emitter, and they actually emit 2.5 times of what the US does every year at this point. However, given their vastly larger population, they only emit 2/3 of what the US does on a per-person basis per year. And when we look at history, they've only emitted half of the emissions that the US has over the course of the past several hundred years. And the truth is, China is trying to address climate change. They're currently the #1 producer of green energy, and they produce a greater share of their total energy from green sources than the US does. So do we all need to do our part? For sure. But India has done much less harm in the past, and they're doing less harm right now, and they have less money to make changes. China is now trying to do their part, and we need to do the same. We can't point fingers at other people and avoid our responsibility. Although it's unlikely from the current administration, we should be doing our part, and it's up to all of us to keep pushing.